What if the biggest thing standing between you and financial freedom isn't your salary, your job, or even the economy? What if it's the one thing you carry with you everywhere? Your brain. Because sometimes your brain doesn't actually want you to become richer. Not because it hates you, not because you're incapable, but because your brain is designed to keep you safe, not successful. And those two goals can look completely different. Imagine someone gives you $10,000 tomorrow. At first, you're excited. You imagine paying off debt, investing, traveling, maybe finally buying something you've wanted for years. But 6 months later, somehow you're back where you started. This happens more often than people think. And the strange part is that the person didn't necessarily make one enormous mistake. They made dozens of tiny decisions that felt completely reasonable at the time. A little extra spending here, a subscription they barely use, a weekend of impulse purchases, a few unnecessary upgrades, a little money sitting in the bank because investing feels risky. And slowly, without noticing it, the money disappears. Why? Because your brain has something called a comfort zone, and your financial comfort zone can be surprisingly powerful. If you've spent years living paycheck to paycheck, your brain can begin treating that situation as normal. Not good, not enjoyable, just familiar. And the brain loves familiar. Think about this. Have you ever complained about being tired, stressed, or unhappy with your routine, and then continued doing exactly the same thing the next day? That's not necessarily laziness. It's your brain choosing predictability over uncertainty. Your brain would often rather experience a familiar problem than an unfamiliar possibility. And this is where money becomes interesting. Because getting richer requires doing things your current brain may interpret as uncomfortable. Saving instead of spending, waiting instead of buying, investing instead of keeping everything in, cash, learning a skill instead of scrolling, negotiating instead of accepting the first offer, starting something uncertain instead of staying in a job you already understand. None of these behaviors are physically dangerous. But your brain doesn't always care about that. It reacts strongly to uncertainty, and uncertainty feels expensive. Here's a simple example. Imagine you have $500. Someone offers you a guaranteed $50. Then they offer you another option. A coin is flipped. Heads, you get $100. Tails, you get nothing. Which one would you choose? Most people become surprisingly cautious when real money is involved. Now reverse the situation. Imagine you owe $500. Someone tells you that you can either pay $50 right now or flip a coin. Heads, your entire debt disappears. Tails, you owe $1,000. Suddenly, people often become much more willing to gamble. Why? Because losing something you already have feels more painful than gaining something you don't have. Psychologists call this loss aversion, and it quietly controls financial decisions every day. You might know an investment could grow your money, but your brain whispers, "What if I lose it?" You might know changing jobs could increase your income, but your brain says, "What if the new job doesn't work out?" You might know starting a business could create another source of income, but your brain says, "What if everyone thinks I failed?" And then you stay exactly where you are. Not because the current situation is great, because the alternative feels dangerous. But there's an even deeper problem. Your brain doesn't just protect you from losing money. It can protect you from changing your identity, because your financial behavior becomes part of who you believe you are. Maybe you've always thought, "I'm just not good with money. I'm not an investing person. People like me don't become wealthy. I'm terrible at business. I'm just someone who lives paycheck to paycheck." These sentences sound harmless, but repeat them for 10 years, and they stop sounding like beliefs. They start sounding like facts. And once your brain accepts an identity, it tries to behave consistently with it. This is why someone can receive a raise and still feel broke. Their income changed, their identity didn't. They earn more, so they spend more. Their lifestyle expands. Their financial anxiety stays. And eventually, the new income feels just as small as the old income. This is called lifestyle inflation. But there's something even more dangerous hiding underneath it. Your brain gets used to whatever becomes normal if you upgrade. Your phone today, the excitement eventually disappears. If you buy a nicer car, eventually it becomes your normal car. If you move into a more expensive apartment, eventually the apartment stops feeling luxurious. Then your brain asks for the next upgrade. This is hedonic adaptation, and it's one of the reasons people can earn twice as much money without feeling twice as wealthy. The problem isn't always that they don't make enough. Sometimes their definition of enough keeps moving. And social media makes this worse, because you're no longer comparing yourself with the people around you. You're comparing yourself with the most successful people on the planet. You see the luxury car, the expensive vacation, the perfect apartment, the entrepreneur who claims to make six figures from a laptop. And your brain quietly creates a new equation. If they have that, I should have that too. But there's something you don't see. You don't see their debt. You don't see their failed investments. You don't see the years before the success. You don't see the family support. You don't see the business partners. You don't see the camera turning off. You're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. And then you spend money trying to feel successful before you've actually become financially secure. That's one of the most expensive psychological traps in modern life. But here's where things get uncomfortable. Sometimes spending money isn't really about buying things. It's about buying emotions. You don't always buy the coffee because you need coffee. Sometimes you buy it because you need a tiny reward after a terrible morning. You don't always order something online because you need it. Sometimes you're bored. Sometimes you're stressed. Sometimes you're lonely. Sometimes you just want that little moment of excitement when the package arrives. And companies understand this better than you think. Modern marketing isn't simply asking, do you need this? It's asking, how do you want to feel? Confident, attractive, successful, relaxed, important, loved. And when your brain learns that spending can temporarily create those feelings, you can become trapped in a loop. Stress, spend, temporary relief, regret, stress again, then spend again. The purchase wasn't the real problem. The emotion underneath it was. And this leads to one of the biggest secrets about financial behavior. Your money habits may have less to do with mathematics than with psychology, because you can know exactly how compound interest works and still spend every paycheck. You can understand budgeting and still avoid checking your bank account. You can know that investing matters and still tell yourself you'll start next month. Knowledge isn't always the missing ingredient. Sometimes emotional control is. And then there's another trap almost nobody talks about. The desire to look successful can become more powerful than the desire to become wealthy. These are not the same thing. Looking wealthy means having things people can see. Being wealthy often means having things people can't see. Savings, investments, low debt, ownership, skills, time, options. The strange thing is that the person driving the expensive car may have less financial freedom than the person driving an ordinary one, because one person owns the car while the other person may be owned by the payment, and your brain has a difficult time appreciating invisible wealth. It gets excited by visible rewards. A new phone feels real. An investment account growing quietly doesn't. A luxury vacation gives you an immediate emotional reward. Saving that money for 10 years doesn't. Your brain naturally prefers immediate rewards. This is called temporal discounting. The farther away a reward is, the less emotionally valuable it feels today. And that's why saving for your future self can feel strangely painful. You're basically asking your present self to sacrifice for someone you've never met. Your future self. But here's the twist. That future person is still you. 5 years from now, you will wake up as the person your current decisions created, and you may either thank yourself or wonder why you kept choosing temporary comfort. So what actually changes the pattern? Not becoming obsessed with money, not waking up at 5 a.m., not cutting every small pleasure from your life, and definitely not pretending that everyone can become wealthy through positive thinking. The first step is much simpler. Start noticing the moment before the decision. Before you buy something, ask, what am I actually trying to get from this? Is it the object? Or relief? Status? Entertainment? Approval? Escape? Before you avoid investing, ask, am I making a rational decision, or am I simply afraid of losing? Before you reject an opportunity, ask, is this genuinely a bad opportunity, or is unfamiliarity making it feel dangerous? These questions create something incredibly important, a gap, a tiny gap between the impulse and the action. And inside that gap, you regain control. Because your brain will always produce impulses. You will always want comfort. You will always want immediate rewards. You will always compare yourself to someone. You will always be tempted to. Choose what's familiar. The goal isn't to destroy those instincts. It's to stop letting them make every decision. And perhaps the most important shift is this. Stop asking, can I afford this? Start asking, what does this decision make possible or impossible for my future? Because technically, you might be able to afford the expensive phone, but what else could that money become? A skill, an investment, an emergency fund, a business experiment, a year of breathing room. The real cost of something isn't always the number on the price tag. Sometimes it's the future you quietly traded for it. And that's why your brain can sometimes keep you poor. Not because it wants you to suffer, it wants you to stay safe. It wants certainty. It wants comfort. It wants immediate rewards. It wants you to avoid embarrassment, rejection, uncertainty, and loss. But financial freedom often begins on the other side of those feelings. The moment you stop asking your brain, what feels safest right now, and start asking, what choice gives my future self more freedom? Because poverty isn't always created by one terrible financial decision. Sometimes it's created by thousands of tiny decisions that feel harmless until you look back 10 years later. And wealth isn't always built by one brilliant move either. Sometimes it's built quietly through the boring choices nobody notices. The money you didn't spend, the risk you finally took, the skill you learned, the opportunity you didn't run away from, the temptation you walked past, the future you chose over the feeling of right now. Your brain will always try to protect the person you are today, but your life is shaped by the person you choose to become tomorrow. And maybe the most dangerous financial question isn't, how can I make more money? Maybe it's, what am I repeatedly doing today that my future self will have to pay for?